this plays. Let's see.
The WNBA task force came out with a statement that said it's going to take us weeks or even months to figure out what is a woman and who should be allowed to play in the Women's National Basketball Association. What was your reaction?
I think the WNBA speaks for itself. We should keep it just women only, biological women only.
I think the definition is pretty obvious, and it's 2 letters, XX. There's no question about that.
Science is pretty clear. As an educator, it doesn't take much to go back and learn in biology that there are 2 genders.
That is the main argument behind this entire fight. But the real story is not just about what these people said. It is also about who came out to support Sophie Cunningham. Once you look at the people around her, it becomes much harder to simply label the whole situation as political.
But the thing that they are not going to like you to know, and that they don't want to know, is the crowd was not just conservatives. Shockingly, to much of the WNBA and liberal media, this group isn't just a bunch of conservatives who completely align on all their politics. It's a diverse group of people that represent a beautiful mix of registered Democrats, conservatives, and people from a wide range of backgrounds and communities.
But there is one thing they may not want people to know. The crowd was not made up of conservatives alone. Surprisingly, especially to some WNBA and liberal media audiences, this was not simply a group of conservatives who all agree politically. It was a mix of registered Democrats, conservatives, and people from many different backgrounds and communities. That detail changes the story right away. According to the report being discussed, the rally was not politically uniform. It included registered Democrats, conservatives, and people from different backgrounds who came together around one specific issue. That does not mean they agreed about everything else, and it certainly does not mean one rally represents what the entire country believes. But it does make the story more complicated than the simple political label being used. If people who disagree on many other issues are willing to stand together here, then the bigger question becomes, what exactly is Sophie Cunningham connecting with that can bring people from different political sides together? That is the part worth watching. Much of the debate around Sophie has focused on which political side people believe she represents. But according to the reporter who was there, the people supporting her may be a much more diverse group than that. Later, another moment from the same report makes this even more interesting, because one person at the event identifies with a political group that some viewers probably would not expect.
So my boy, my homie, Johnny Root at Outkick, hit me this morning with this article he wrote for Outkick and Fox News, and it was about Sophie Cunningham supporters at the rally in Indiana. He was there on site last night. He was the one that, unfortunately, a lot of people didn't like the fact that he said, hey, they weren't.
Notice why this matters. The host is using an eyewitness account from someone who says he was physically present at both the arena and the rally. That does not mean every opinion in the commentary is automatically correct. But it gives us something more useful than random guesses on social media. Someone was actually there and saw what happened in person. That is important because this entire discussion has been filled with different stories about the crowds, reactions, cheers, alcohol, and what different groups of WNBA fans supposedly believe. When people start using a 30-second phone video as proof of what an entire movement thinks, the basic context can quickly disappear. Where was the camera? How many people were there? Who was being interviewed? Was that person speaking for the whole crowd, or were they simply the loudest person nearby? Those questions matter. The stronger conclusion is much simpler. A rally happened outside the Fever Wings game. The reporter mentioned in this video was there, and according to his description, the people at the rally did not all belong to one political group. That is worth considering, without pretending it proves more than it actually does. If Sophie Cunningham's support is starting to attract people who normally vote differently, follow different political groups, and watch completely different media, then that tells us something about the public image she is developing. She is becoming more than just a role player people talk about because of basketball. She is becoming a symbol that different groups are using to express much bigger arguments. That can be powerful for an athlete, but it can also become a trap. Once the public turns you into a symbol, everything you do can be viewed through a political lens. Every appearance gets analyzed, every quote gets picked apart, and sometimes even staying silent is treated as a political statement. Sophie may enjoy some of this attention, dislike other parts of it, or simply continue being herself. But one thing is clear, the audience around her is already trying to decide what she represents, even before she has fully decided that for herself.
I like Sophie more and more and more. She took to the Clayton's Country Bar to sing Toby Keith's, rest in peace, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue. I can't really play. I can show you the video, but I can't play the song because it'll get copyrighted.
You get a completely different picture of Sophie. She is not standing at a podium or giving a formal political speech. She is simply out at a country bar after the game, with the host describing her singing along to a Toby Keith song. That contrast is a big reason this story has gained so much attention. People are not only reacting to her opinions. They are reacting to her personality. In sports, personality can travel much farther than politics. Fans often connect with small moments that feel real and unscripted. It could be a celebration after a win, a funny comment during a press conference, or a player showing up somewhere that matches the image fans already have of them. Those moments make an athlete feel familiar and real instead of carefully manufactured. That is especially important for the WNBA right now. The league has received much more mainstream attention in recent years, including from people who never followed women's basketball before. Many of these new fans do not have decades of loyalty to the league. Instead, they connect with individual players first. They discover Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, or another player they like, and then they start paying attention to the league because that player matters to them. Sophie has benefited from this trend. Her popularity is obviously not on the same level as Caitlin Clark's, so comparing the two would not be fair. But Sophie has become recognizable to people who may never have searched for her basketball statistics before. That is a meaningful change. The bigger question is whether this attention stays connected to Sophie as a basketball player or whether the surrounding political and cultural arguments become so dominant that basketball becomes secondary. If that happens, everyone could lose control of the story, including Sophie herself.
Shockingly, to much of the WNBA and liberal media, this group isn't just a bunch of conservatives who completely align on all their politics. It's a diverse group of people that represent a beautiful mix of registered Democrats, conservatives, and people from a wide range of backgrounds and communities. It's not some sort of MAGA coalition, which many love to claim. It's a group that represents America.
There is the main point again. The group was politically mixed instead of being one ideological group. But we need to be careful with what that actually proves. The reporter is describing the people he saw at this particular event. That does not tell us the political views of every Sophie Cunningham supporter, every Fever fan, or every WNBA viewer. Still, it is interesting because it challenges the idea that support for Sophie can be explained with one simple political label. This also matters for the business side of sports. Professional sports leagues do not grow by making everyone think the same way. They grow when people who disagree about many things can still come together because they love the same game. That is one of the special things about sports. Two fans can vote differently, live completely different lives, and disagree about politics or culture, but they can still celebrate together when their team hits a three-pointer at the buzzer. So when a sports story brings people together in the same place even though they have different political views, the league has a choice. It can see that disagreement as a threat because the subject is controversial, or it can recognize that its audience may be much broader and less predictable than social media makes it seem. And that brings us to the person quoted in the article, because this is where the simple idea of a left versus right crowd gets challenged directly.
Kara Dansky, a registered Democrat who serves on the board of Democrats for an informed approach to gender, told me, quote, "The truth of the matter is the clear majority of registered Democrats in this country are aligned on these topics." It's what we used to call the classic liberal. The more Bill Maher types. What Elon Musk used to be. What Robert Kennedy Jr. used to be. Until everybody went plumb insane.
That quote is important for one main reason. The speaker is identified in the report as a registered Democrat, yet she is openly supporting a position that many people online automatically connect with conservatives. You do not have to agree with her opinion to understand why this matters. It shows that political groups are often much more complicated than the simple labels people use online, and social media often hides that complexity. Social media algorithms reward simple stories. They like a clear hero, a clear villain, and clearly divided groups. If a story can be reduced to, these people believe this, and those people believe that, it spreads much faster. But real people are rarely that simple. Someone can support abortion rights while disagreeing with a specific sports policy. Someone can vote Republican but disagree with other conservatives on many issues. Someone can dislike the host of this video and still believe that one of his arguments is worth discussing. That is why the political identity of this rally should not be treated as the final answer. The bigger point is that Sophie Cunningham appears to have become a meeting point for people who may share some concerns while having very different political beliefs. From a sports media perspective, that could be more important than a rally made up of one predictable political group. A predictable group is easy to label and eventually easy to ignore. But a politically mixed audience is harder to dismiss because it suggests the controversy is reaching people outside the boundaries where critics expected it to stay. There is also a danger in this. Once an athlete becomes connected to an issue bigger than sports, the organizations around that athlete can start focusing more on the controversy than on the person. Reporters keep asking political questions. Every public appearance becomes evidence for someone's argument. Every interaction with a fan gets placed into one cultural or political category. Eventually, the real person can disappear behind the symbol. So the real test for Sophie is not whether she can attract attention. She is already doing that. The bigger challenge is whether she can maintain enough control over her own image so people can still tell the difference between what Sophie Cunningham actually says and what other people say while holding a sign with her name on it.
Well, these girls are watching today. There are girls that do not understand what Title IX meant in 1972 to the women like you who benefited from Title IX. You owe these girls a commitment to female sports.
This is another example of how the rally has moved beyond Sophie herself and into the much older legal and cultural debate around Title IX and women's sports. The speaker connects today's argument to the history of opportunities that Title IX created for women in education and athletics. That gives supporters a historical reason for why they believe the issue is so important. But there is a difference between explaining that argument and saying that everyone agrees on what Title IX or today's policies should mean. They do not. These issues involve ongoing legal, political, medical, and sports debates, and different organizations have taken different positions. For this video, the important point is how Sophie's name has become connected to this larger debate. She is no longer being discussed only as a guard for Indiana. People are using her as a symbol while making arguments about the future of women's sports. That raises the stakes for the WNBA itself. Normally, a sports league wants the conversation to focus on basketball, games, standings, stars, rivalries, playoff races, injuries, and coaching decisions. But when the main discussion becomes about who should be allowed to participate, what league officials believe, or whether leadership is responding quickly enough to a cultural controversy, the focus moves away from basketball and toward trust in the organization. And trust is much harder to manage than a bad referee call. A bad call can be forgotten when the next game begins. But if fans lose trust in league leadership, that problem can follow executives from one interview to the next. Every answer they give becomes another test of whether the audience believes the organization is actually listening.
A group called the LGB Courage Coalition also rallied outside the Fever Wings game with a gigantic sign that said chemical castration isn't medicine. Save girls' sports, save boys' bodies. Bravo on that.
That sign shows how far the event had moved beyond a normal sports rally. At this point, people were not simply arguing about playing time, rotations, or whether Indiana should defend screens differently. Activists were using the attention around a WNBA game to make broader arguments about sex, gender, medicine, and policies involving young people. That is why it is important to separate three different groups that are often mixed together. First, there is Sophie Cunningham, the individual player. Second, there are supporters and advocacy groups who may believe Sophie supports their cause. Third, there is the WNBA, which is responsible for running a professional sports league. These groups may overlap in some ways, but they are not the same thing. An activist holding a sign outside an arena does not automatically speak for Sophie. Sophie does not automatically speak for every Fever fan. And the Fever do not automatically represent every position held by the WNBA. Keeping those differences clear makes the whole story easier to understand. This is not simply a story about Sophie versus the league. It is a much bigger public debate, and Sophie's growing popularity has made her one of the most visible names connected to it. That visibility can bring more followers, media attention, merchandise interest, and new fans. But it can also attract people who want to use an athlete's popularity to promote causes that existed long before that athlete became famous. That can be the price of becoming culturally important much faster than anyone expected.